Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Quaadman, Executive Vice President with the Chamber's Center for Capital Markets Competitiveness. Welcome to our last Access to Capital event of 2020. And hopefully when we start this up again in 2021, we'll be able to do some of this live. Last June, the Chamber launched the Equality of Opportunity Initiative to foster a united commitment among the business community to advance sound policies and business solutions that can help close race-based opportunity gaps. Since June, the Chamber has engaged in over 100 events, meetings, and briefings with various stakeholders. We've launched more than 10 chamber-wide initiatives and programs, and we have endorsed 14 bills on the Hill aimed at promoting equality of opportunity. The EOI initiative has 4 tracks: employment, education, criminal justice reform, and entrepreneurship. The CCMC team, under the leadership of Julie Stitzel, has spent the last 6 months focusing on the entrepreneurship track, specifically increasing access to capital for minority-owned businesses. We included a section dedicated to access to capital in our recently released Growth Engine report and have regularly convened a working group comprised of Chamber members who are helping to guide our efforts. In October, we had the pleasure of hosting FDIC Chair McWilliams, who discussed the FDIC's efforts to strengthen minority depository institutions and community development financial institutions. I recently sat down with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina to talk about his efforts in the Senate to increase access to capital for minority-owned businesses. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by a key champion of equality of opportunity initiatives, Representative Gregory Meeks. Congressman Meeks represents Queens, New York, the 5th District of New York, and was recently elected as the first Black chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So congratulations, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Meeks is also a senior member of the House Financial Services Committee, and he told us backstage he's not going anywhere, and is also a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Meeks for many years on a host of policy issues, and we're thrilled to have him with us this morning. Congressman, thank you for being with us today.
Good being with you, Tom. Thank you for having me.
So, Congressman, there's not a chamber event that we can do right now without asking this first question. And it's really, we have a lot of people across the country are wondering whether Congress is going to pass a relief package before the end of the year. We have been advocating fiercely for this to happen, and some of the small business numbers are startling. In fact, I saw a report last week that showed that I think 28% of the small businesses in New York and New Jersey have gone out of business this year, and nearly 37% of small businesses have seen a drop in revenue in this month alone. I think some 73% of small businesses have received some form of assistance through the PPP program, which I know you have supported. And over 20% expect that they need some form of relief over the next 6 months. Do you think that Congress is going to have the ability to pass legislation that provides relief for small businesses before the end of the year?
Tom, I certainly hope so. We're going to go back on Tuesday with the hope that negotiations are continuing to take place as we speak and that we get something done. Many of us say that we should not leave Washington even during the holiday season until we get something done, because we know how desperate many are, but small businesses particularly, and residents, etc. So we've got to get something done. Unfortunately, it's been a hard agreement to come by. Some 5-6 months ago, we passed the HEROES Act, which had a lot of things in it. It was a longer term agreement because with interest rates so low, I believe that the bigger the package, the better it would be. But now we've agreed and tried to work down. There was a group on a bipartisan basis that came together on a $908 billion package for a shorter term for 4 months. Now the question is to making agreements on how we will spend it. Now, one area where I think that we are in accord is dealing with small businesses. And I hope we can get a deal done, because there was some unspent PPP money that can help enterprises grow across the country and utilize these funds that they desperately need. I also hope that we can tweak it, because for many of them, PPP initially started out as a loan. We need to also try to figure out how either some of the old PP that they received or the new is actually a grant, because they're so substantially hurt, especially minority businesses and small businesses of that nature. So I'm hopeful that, I know that there's negotiations getting done. I last talked before I left Washington yesterday with a couple of individuals that I know that will be doing further negotiations during this period of time. And they all indicated to me that that we are very close. So hopefully we'll get something done next week.
Congressman, the chamber had supported some language that you and Chairwoman Waters got into the HEROES Act to strengthen CDFIs. So if we're going to see a legislative package get done this year, do you think that there's going to be ability to include some form of relief for minority-owned small businesses? And if so, what form do you think that might take?
Well, we had, again, and I keep bringing this up, but we had language of that nature in the HEROES bill that passed. And unfortunately, I know that a lot of that was stripped out on the second package, and I'm not sure whether there'll be any targeted relief in the package, given the positions that some of our Republican colleagues had. But we're trying. I had a conversation not too long ago with Senator Mark Warner, where we are negotiating and trying to put some $12 billion or so into this bill directly for emergency investments into small businesses and minority and rural communities, so that they would have access to some capital. So we're working hard to get it back in there. Of course, I think in a bigger package would be easier to get done, but it's a question of how we're going to spend the smaller $908 billion as opposed to either the 3.2 that we initially proposed in the HEROES Act, or even the 2.2 of our compromise bill that we were trying to work on. So, but it's desperately needed. And if we don't get it now, I'm hopeful that we know we're going to need another bill after this one is done, since this is a short-term bill and it's something that we can really get into into a longer-term package.
No, that's exactly our viewpoint as well, right? This is not a one and done thing. We're going to need more that's done here as well. And Congressman, one of the catalysts around why we launched the Equality of Opportunity Initiative was the fact that the pandemic was disproportionately impacting minority-owned businesses. Look, you and I have both worked on these issues for a long time, and it's very important to get things done on a bipartisan basis. And in fact, I'm going to raise an example that you and I've worked on before later on. But are you working with Republicans at all on some of these initiatives to help minority-owned businesses?
Oh, absolutely. And there has been great reception in that regards. Where there's a number of bills that we worked on. In fact, there are bills that we've gotten out of the House Financial Services Committee unanimously, got to the floor. We're able to do it, in a bipartisan way. Some of them got hung up in the Senate thereafter, and I'm talking to a number of senators now. So it is really important. And Tom, I want to thank you. I know that and applaud the chamber for this initiative that you've been embarked on. And this is, I think, an idea and an example, I should say, of how working across the aisle, is. Even though at times the Democratic caucus and even I may not see the eye to eye with everything that the chamber does, but what the policies that you're doing and how you're reaching out now, particularly to focus on minority-owned businesses, is a tremendous, I think, example of what can be done when we work together.
Congressman, you and I have talked before about how access to capital is so important. And when we looked at these issues, one of the things we found, right, was that because Black entrepreneurs have historically not had the same access to financing as others have, right? They've not been able to form some of the businesses that are faster growing, that have a greater chance for success. So as we looked at addressing these issues, we thought that entrepreneurship and access to capital and changing that dynamic and paradigm was very, very important with that. In addition to the CDFI language that you had helped get into the HEROES Act, both you and Chairwoman Waters, released a package of bills in August to strengthen CDFIs and MDIs, which are so critical for the financing of Black entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit about that package, which is, I think, a very significant event?
Yeah, it was about access to capital, access to capital, access to capital. This applies to small businesses like we have. And what we're talking about is, if you look into various minority communities, the best way to do that is through MDIs and CDFIs. We noticed even with the PPP money that came out initially, the first tranche of that, a lot of the small businesses and minority-owned businesses did not really have access to it because they didn't have a nexus and or a relationship with some of the bigger banks. They had a better relationship with MDIs and CDFIs. And so when we mandated that MDIs and CDFIs have greater access to the PPP money, you saw more small businesses, more minority-owned businesses getting access to PPP money. So therefore, we put into the proposal that we had making and trying to make sure that we strengthen MDIs and CDFIs so that they can then get to the individual small businesses in various underserved communities, which we think is tremendously important. And what we know is that MDIs, if you look at the number of minority depository institutions, they have been going steadily down, been losing them. And the reason why we lose them is because the lack of access to capital. If they could not be completely dependent upon the accounts that they receive or the customers that they have that have regular checking and savings accounts, because in many of these communities, the checks go in and the money comes right back out at the beginning of the month to pay for their bills. They don't have any sitting capital to do other things, to advance their technologies or anything of that nature. So if we were able to, as Maxine Waters and myself on the House side, Vice President-elect Harris and Senator Warner on the Senate side, if we were able to get investments from Treasury and others into these institutions, they would then have the ability to sustain themselves, and as well as then be able to put out capital to our minority and small businesses in underserved areas particularly.
So, Congressman, getting businesses started is one thing, right? But also allowing businesses to grow from small to large is awfully important, right? Because that's where you see the job creation, that's where you see the wealth creation going on. And back in 2012, Democrats and Republicans got together and they passed the Jobs Act, right, to get rid of some of the regulatory obstacles that were making it hard for businesses to grow from small to large. And there's been some talk about that there might be a similar capital formation package possibly coming out of Congress next year. But as we've also looked at Black entrepreneurship, one of the items we have worked on and are suggesting is tasking the small business advocate at the SEC with reporting back to Congress within 100 days of what are the regulatory obstacles that are preventing Black entrepreneurs from, being able to grow, their businesses and dealing with those issues. So if we are going to see a capital formation package, what are some of the things you think we might be able to do in order to prioritize Black entrepreneurship?
Well, look, when I think about previous provisions that we've had, like Save Our Streets Act, which was which I worked on then and working on now also with now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. This bill includes money that's targeted at micro businesses. As you know, small businesses are currently defined by the SBA, really includes intermediate businesses and includes money to minority business centers and training programs that I believe would be very valuable to grow these businesses so they can get bigger and make sure they can take the next step and not have ceilings upon them. I think this is something that we can do and we should be able to do in a timely fashion and in a bipartisan manner. I've talked to one of my colleagues from Kentucky, actually, on the House Financial Services Committee, and he this past week, he says, "Look, please include me because I think it's something that I can support and work with." And we know that both, to agree, both urban areas, urban underserved areas, and rural underserved areas, where there's a lot of African Americans in rural America also, are suffering. And so I think we can bring something like this together and get something done that will help some of the small and particularly minority-owned businesses to not only sustain themselves, but to grow and to have that ability to grow within the SBA system.
So, there was a lot in the news over the last week about NASDAQ with board diversity and their proposal where they want to push forward on, businesses to have more diverse boards over a period of time. But you have been a leader in this area for a very, very long time. And your bill, the Improving Corporate Governance Through Diversity Act, would require public companies to disclose diversity of their board of directors and executives. That passed by an overwhelming bipartisan majority in the House. And I know we are all trying to get that through the Senate. But do you think, given this building momentum around diversity disclosure, that the legislation, if it's not going to make it through this year, do you see it coming back under consideration and getting passed by both chambers next year?
Yeah, let me first say, and I want to thank, I had an opportunity to speak with NASDAQ CEO Adina Friedman before they announced their provisions, and she did indicate that our legislation was an important reason they felt they had to go ahead with their plan. And I thank NASDAQ for taking this initiative, and we know that the SEC needs to look at it and move and improve, and we'll hope under the new administration that we'll get that done. But absolutely, I think that if we don't get it done in this Congress, we should get it done in the next Congress. The fact of the matter is, it was just one senator in the Senate. One senator, when you're in the club of 1 of 100, have that ability. But one senator is the one that has blocked it from being passed in the Senate. And so we is holding it up. And I have no clue of the reasons why he's holding it up. But I do intend on having further dialogue and conversation with him in the 117th Congress. And I'm hopeful that we can work out whatever those issues may be so that we can turn the legislation into the law of the land.
Well, we've been working with you on this. So if there are ways that we could be helpful there, you let me know.
I will. For that.
And then just the last question, Congressman, we'll let you go because I know you've been very generous with your time. But we've been talking a lot about what the government can do, right? But the private sector also has a role here when we're talking about Black entrepreneurship. And, I know we've been working with a lot of our different members. And one example, I think, Allstate recently did $1 billion plus bond offering. And they went out and they used minority firms in order to get that, in order to market that bond offering, get it into the market and sell it. And they did it. One was to make sure that those firms had the business, but more importantly was also to help build out the expertise that those firms have, so that they can also help Black entrepreneurs, right? Build that muscle. What do you think? With the last word, what do you think the private sector can do to help Black entrepreneurship and help Black business owners?
Well, here's one reason why having other Blacks on these boards, et cetera, is important, because they can then help direct you to where to go and this is why voluntary diversity disclosures are a good place to start, in my opinion, because financial institutions, for example, should think about how they can recruit and obtain more diverse talent. I was working with the Black Economic Alliance, for example. I know they've got a plan that they recently put out, working with a number of other companies that will create thousands of jobs. And these are the types of jobs that we want to talk about creating, because these jobs will be good paying jobs. So we have, banks and fintechs and asset managers and stock exchanges and credit rating agencies. Everybody can work on this and needs to be thinking about how to recruit underprivileged and underrepresented candidates, so that opens those doors of opportunities. One of the things that, I don't like right now, Tom, is some of the conversation that we have on the Hill, where a number of folks think that we need to get rid of Wall Street, we need to get rid of all corporations. That's the very essence of who we are as a country and our economy. But my fun thing is, we just wanted to be fair and equal and accessible to all. And I think that's for good business. So when we open those doors up and people are actively recruiting and we improve our educational system so that, people are exposed to what is and what opportunities are out there, then I think it's better for the nation as a whole, but particularly starts transforming individuals in underprivileged and in minority communities. Because for me, and I'm a big advocate. I don't want you to. I know we've got this dialogue that goes on between us at times about the minimum wage and $15 an hour, et cetera. And I happen to be for that. But you can't make a real living and provide for your families if that's the only aspiration is $15 an hour. I want folks to be aspirational and looking for the career jobs that can pay a lot of money so that you can raise a family and have a decent life. And we should not be, we should be fighting to open those doors, not closing those doors for everybody, but open those doors so that everybody can share in it.
Well, Congressman, thank you very much. Those are some very strong words, and we look forward to working with you in partnership on the diversity board bill and a host of other things, and look forward to working with you on minority access to capital issues as we always have. So we appreciate it. And if I don't talk to you, have a happy holiday season. Thank
you, Tom. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks so much for working with us on this important issue and to continue to spread the word. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And I can now turn our program over to my friend and colleague, Rick Wade, with our panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Tom, and what a wonderful conversation with our friend Congressman Greg Meeks on the importance of access to capital. As Tom mentioned, our equality of opportunity initiative is about advancing private sector as well as policy solutions to strengthen Black and other minority businesses in the United States. The reality is that these businesses are not just job creators, but they're very important anchors in local communities. And there's great concern that we have today. In a recent survey that we did with MetLife at the U.S. Chamber, we found that some 66% of Black and minority-owned businesses are concerned about permanently closing. There are some 8 million minority firms across America, some 2.6 million Black-owned enterprises. And here's what we do know, even prior to the pandemic, that Black-owned, non-employer businesses are less than half as likely to get financing as white-owned firms. We know that Black entrepreneurs are nearly 3 times more likely to have business growth and profitability negatively impacted by a lack of financial capital. So this conversation I'm looking forward to. We're excited to have a business owner and one of our corporate partners. Please welcome Rochelle Casal, founder and owner of the Galileo Schools, and Kamati Marengo, Global Head of Prepaid at Visa. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us in this very, very important conversation. As Congressman Greg Meeks said, it's about access to capital, access to capital, access to capital. Rochelle, let's start with you. Tell us just briefly about your business and the challenges that you face regarding accessing lending and capital.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I own a preschool. We started actually 15 years ago with one preschool, my deceased husband and I, and we expanded pretty quickly into 2, realizing ahead of time that there was great demand in the area, and have since expanded to 3 with the plan of going to a 4th one just before the pandemic hit. So our focus has been on early childhood education, STEAM technology introduced as a part of that education, and really preparing our youngsters for school in a strong way.
Well, good. Now, so you and I have talked briefly, and you kind of had challenges, but yet success. Share a bit of an insight as you start to grow and expand and seek capital.
Right.
Give us an insight there.
So we actually went to look for capital when we decided to start our first preschool, my deceased husband and I, and we both were educated. We had college educations. We had both worked in corporate for a long time, but we were not granted capital because even though we had a lot of expertise to bring to the table, so we decided to actually use our home equity line of credit. Our business has gone on to be a 15-year strong account. And so from that perspective, there can be questions asked about maybe how it is that banks weren't able to vet that we might be profitable in a very profitable area. But we went on to still be successful. And as a result of that success, we're able to build great partnerships with leading banks and relationships with leading banks that helped us to be able to sustain and grow. And ultimately, when the pandemic hit, it was actually one of those critical factors that became important in being able to get a PPP loan ultimately.
Kamathi, you think about Visa, global payments technology company working to enable customers, consumers, banks, governments, digital currency. Companies are stepping up and have been stepping up in amazing ways to help address some of these challenges, particularly those related to small businesses. Tell us a bit about what Visa has been doing specifically, focused on working with and supporting Black and minority entrepreneurs and business owners.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for this opportunity to join you today. You know, Visa's mission is to connect the world through our network to enable individuals, economies, businesses, and economies to thrive. And so when you think about small businesses, they really actually span all three of those categories. While there are businesses by nature, many of them are individuals or sole proprietorships with 1 or 2 employees. And when you add it all up, 30 million small businesses in the US, 60 million employees, I mean, that's a big backbone of the economy. And we see that. We see that here in the United States. We see it globally. One of the things that we did is we made a long-term commitment on a global basis and committed $200 million to help and to be focused on helping small businesses through NGOs and also through financing institutions that operate on a nonprofit basis to help small businesses. So that's what we did on a global basis, and this is a long-term commitment. We've also been very focused in the United States on helping individuals, both through our partnership with I Fund Women, which is focused on helping small businesses that are run by women, and then we expanded that in the pandemic, learning and seeing the same research that you've seen, and helping provide $10,000 grants to we initially 10. But then another 25. So really expanding $10,000 grants with mentorship and with coaching to those recipients so that they can actually get to the next level, but also just get through what we're going through right now.
You know, Kamathi, have you seen, or what have you seen from where you sit at Visa? Any perspectives on challenges that minority businesses themselves are facing? For example, one of the things that Congressman Meeks talked about, which we found as a result of the distribution of PPP funding, was a lack of business relationships. What insight or what things have you seen that minority businesses should be thinking about and can help solve themselves along with business and industry?
That's a very important point. You know, when we think about access to capital, it's more than just getting money into your hands. It's also access to information. It's access to networking and coaching. And when it comes to that specific question, there's a lack of access to information that will provide a small business owner, a minority business owner, to what are the tips and tricks. We've hosted panels. We've hosted sessions during a National Small Business Week, for example, where our guests have been able to share insights, including things like how do you open a bank and a banking relationship, not just by making that deposit, but maybe by expanding it and including in that using your personal credit score to open up a small business credit line, just so that you can establish that credit history so that you do have a deeper relationship when you need more capital. These are tips and tricks. It was even referred to as secrets that don't necessarily get through to all of our Black-owned businesses, our minority-owned businesses, and we're trying to do something to help expand that access and that access to information as well. And it's through the power of a network.
You bet. And Rochelle, you made a great observation earlier that you make a big distinction between the existence of capital and access to capital. What do you mean by that?
Right. So if those who have had the opportunity to go to the MBA school, you would have heard the word barriers to entry, right, into a marketplace. I say there are barriers to access to capital. So capital can exist and there can be a big pool, a pot of money that's sitting, and then there's actual access to that pool of money that's sitting. So there really is a difference, and we need to be careful when we talk about access to capital. We really should be saying access to existing capital. So capital is sitting there and people need to access it. There are 5 things that I think have been extremely important during the pandemic and even prior to that, right? One of those is being prepared. So we talked about being able to have your books in order and accounted for, our relationships, as Kamathi just mentioned, resources, so being able to have cash flow reserves in place, tech exposure, right, which has been a big issue during the pandemic for PPP applications, and then just pivot strategy. And so when I talk about existence of capital, we have to be extremely careful because there is a lot of capital that exists, but a lot of minority and small business owners don't actually have access to get to it. And that path to get there is even more critical than the fact that the capital is sitting there that they cannot take advantage of.
You referenced, Rochelle, earlier the PPP program. And you know the U.S. Chamber obviously is front and center in advocating for additional funding and support right now, and immediately during the pandemic. What lessons should we have learned from the PPP program and other government programs? I believe you also received 7A, SBA lending, et cetera. But what lessons should we have learned going forward?
It occurs to me that a lot of our small businesses, minority-owned businesses, are also sole proprietorships. And those folks are really subject matter experts. They're not business people, a lot of them. So there really is this gap in helping them understand or build their business acumen that is required to take advantage of these resources, right? So I think there's a huge gap, and we need to really work on the educational component that brings them from subject matter expert, a great cook or chef, right, to being a proper business person who's able to make sure the accounting is in place and all the other things are in place, right? There's also the way we disperse information. Most of our small business owners are not necessarily as tech savvy. They're not getting all of those text messages and those emails. We need to look at community organizations and use them better. Churches, the Chamber of Commerces that are local to the different areas, and provide the expertise that will kind of round out the skill set that a small business owner would have to allow them to be able to take advantage of these, right? So you want to recruit smaller banks into the program. You want to report support structures to help these businesses. And then you want to be able to educate the owners themselves about the entire scope of what is needed to take advantage of these grants. When I am working hard at trying to keep my business open, the last thing I'm able to do is also find all of these things in all these different places. So the path has to be charted better and more local, if you will.
Yeah. Kamathi, one of the things that I think is extremely important, and I saw this in my work at the Department of Commerce, was a need for more research and data. The reality is we do know that most Black businesses are sole proprietors, they're small, but we need more data. We need more research. I was intrigued also by your small business hub. I think to Rochelle's point, this is a place I believe where Black businesses, minority businesses can get access to that education, the tools that they need. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right, Rick, and I'm glad you pointed that out. You know, Rochelle made a very good point about the situation for a small business owner, and it is true. While there might be 30 million stories for 30 million small businesses, there are some trends as well. And one of those trends is, a small business owner starts with a passion. They've got that expertise, but then in the process of building this business, they have to be the CFO. They have to be the chief marketing officer, the head of human resources. And then you throw into all of that mix a pandemic, which disrupts the entire business in the first place. And how do you navigate through all of those things and become the expert, including chief technology officer? So you mentioned the small business hub. There's also the street teams, where we've gone out at Visa to help. We have a goal of 200,000 small businesses that we will connect with, but as of right now, we've connected with over 185,000 small businesses to help them with how do they navigate some of the technology in a touchless pandemic environment, things like that, which can help them get their message out. What kind of signage might they need to help inform the consumers? What might they be able to do to let the broader community know that they are open for business? And so you'll find things that what we've done is we tend to work with and on a network basis, because there's no way we can do all of these things ourselves, but yet the need is out there. And how can we leverage a network? The Small Business Hub is a great place for us to allow as many small businesses as possible to get access to the information that we've put together, we've collated to make it more seamless and more, just to simplify that access that Rochelle was talking about.
Thank you. Rochelle, 2020 has been obviously extremely challenging for everybody personally, and certainly the impact on businesses across the country, particularly small and Black minority businesses. Some say this is a K-shaped recovery where there are winners at the top and a lot of losers at the bottom. But I'd be curious to know, as a business owner, how are you thinking about 2021 and beyond? I talk a lot about perhaps this is a time to reimagine, to reboot, to rethink, to reset. But what are you thinking about as you think about what we've experienced, what we are experiencing still as a result of the pandemic? But as we get to the other side, how are you thinking about your business?
So it's important to understand that I mentioned those things. If you happen to have business acumen, if you happen to have technology expertise, if you happen to have had cash flow reserves of 6 to 9 months or a year, and you were able to pivot, you still are in a cash flow crisis right now going into 2021. So it becomes extremely important at first to be able to shore up, right, your expenses and be able to be clear and predictable about what your expenses are going to be. So financial management becomes extremely important, and to have predictable financial management. Beyond that, because you can kind of predict now what your revenue is going to look like based on what you've seen over the past 3 or 4 months to 6 months. Now, get that said, then you want to layer on top of that what I would call a pivot strategy. So what else can your services be used for in a virtual way? What else can you augment your services with that would allow you to serve beyond your immediate market? And then start to envision that, because that is usually, if we're going virtual, lower cost to entry, lower barrier to entry, really, than some of the brick and mortar things that we've done in the past. So I feel like you have to do both of those things. And I really think it's important for Congress to be able to act, because most small businesses are truly about to really hit the cash flow crisis January of next year. So that's important in addition to pivoting.
Yeah, Kamadi, you obviously sit in a very unique position at Visa. What insights are that you can share from where you sit, what you see that could be useful in terms of industry insights as we think about 2021 and beyond? What knowledge could you share to Black and small-owned businesses?
Oh, look, so we're in the business of, first, to use our network. It's really important to listen, and we are trying to, as many ways as possible, to hear what's happening with the small businesses, to really understand what is going on. And because of our network, we do touch many of these, many both small, medium sized businesses. That gives us a window into what's happening. I think Rochelle is exactly right. This is a time. It's difficult to think of this as time to thrive, whereas but there's the need to pivot for sure. and there's a need to get through this as well. And so from what we see, it's super important. Something that we haven't talked about yet in terms of access to capital is that one of the cheapest forms of capital is basically the revenue that you can get from your customers. And so how can you support that? I'll tie in listening with that particular aspect. After Hurricane Katrina, one of our small businesses, mentioned to one of my colleagues that they were open for business, but they didn't have a way to let people know that they're open for business. And that led to what is now on our website, the Back to Business website, which allows any consumer to see which businesses are open. And while it started through a hurricane, and there are hurricanes in the east and wildfires where I live in the west, now in the pandemic, we're all affected. And having something like that, a resource like that, which allows small businesses to access their customers and let them know that they're open for business, helps as well.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for. And one of the things I think as you think forward, I talk a lot about this is a time to reimagine. I mean, how do we think about joint ventures? How do we think about mergers and acquisitions? And this is a time during this pandemic to really immerse in education with so much knowledge about the tools and resources that Visa has and other companies to do deep internal education and knowledge. Because I think Rochelle was right that it's one thing to have for capital to exist, is another to access. Oftentimes that bridge could be through education and knowledge. As we sort of start winding down here, I'd be curious to know, as we think about the role that Black and minority businesses play, and I think Congressman Meeks touched on this, and I've preached this sermon 1,000 times, if not more, that they're not just businesses and job creators, but they are true important anchors in the social fabric of local minority communities. And so any additional thoughts on how we can not only address the short-term needs, and these are immediate needs, but how do we think long-term about helping these companies survive and thrive for the long term? Because there's so much important to play such an important role, not just to our economy, but to our social organizational structure. Rochelle?
The best story I can think of for this, I actually just spoke with a girlfriend of mine who opened a restaurant, a Caribbean restaurant in New York City. And I love that she is joint venturing with a lady who happens to be Caucasian, who has not even done anything restaurant related. What that has allowed them to be able to do is expand their ability to get credit, right? It's allowed them to expand the network of who they can go after, and it's allowed them to be able to imagine themselves beyond what she would have probably imagined as her customer base. So I think looking and starting to really understand what minority small businesses out there may be looking for joint venture opportunities, and informing them of possible partners in that space could be revolutionary. Because what we've learned during this pandemic is, while it's okay to be able to operate in our silos, I think a lot of joint ventureship is really going to take us out of this pandemic, in addition to kind of our pivot strategy. So I would urge a lot of small businesses out there to start to think beyond your immediate. That's so critical, and start to look for partnerships where you might not have. And it'd be great to have resources that allows them to be able to do that matching, because I think that could be essential to kind of working together to get through this together. And obviously partnerships with Visa and other companies like them would be awesome.
Good. Kamati, anything to share?
Sure. As I mentioned, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And, as it relates to what you pointed out in terms of long-term commitment, what Visa has announced is a long-term commitment, a 5-year commitment that we've done, and that we are in the process of implementing. But this is a network, right? We are a network, and we believe in the power of networks. It infuses everything we do. And we bring that to bear here. So that means that there's a role for everybody to play. We are going to play a role We certainly invite the small businesses to partner with us. We thank you, the Chamber of Commerce, for giving us an opportunity to expand the reach of what we're doing and what we're doing. But then in addition, we need the consumers to be intentional. Be very intentional about the way in which you shop and how you spend your dollars. See ways to support small businesses, the local businesses. See how you can shift some of your behavior, some of your shopping behavior, because that pays dividends, and it is something that's sorely needed right now. So I would just add that to.
Yeah, I think your point is so well taken, and we got to be reminded that Black consumer spending alone in America is over $1 trillion. That is a lot of spending power, which directed obviously to support Black and other minority businesses could be an incredibly important sustainable investment model moving forward. Rochelle, I want to ask you this: as you think about the next generation of minority business owners, this is something that the Chamber, that we're working on diligently with historically Black colleges, other corporations and partners, to inspire young people. When I was in college, in high school rather, than dating myself, the message from my mother and grandmother was go to college and get a good job. And a good job to them was oftentimes a government job. But what we didn't get a lot of was go to college and learn how to be an entrepreneur, to be an innovator. So I'd just be curious about any thoughts that you have or work that you're doing in inspiring. You're already an example, but inspiring this next young generation of Rochelle's.
Thanks. I start at home, and I encourage my sons to be entrepreneurs. I literally encourage them to have a side hustle. And we sit and we have those conversations about what that looks like, and I'm committed to that. Beyond that, I make sure to, in fact, I just recorded a series with another young lady who I mentor around getting to that young generation and helping them understand what the ins and outs of entrepreneurship looks like. I think that systemically or from an institutional perspective, we have to start to talk to our children about what sustainability looks like as an entrepreneur. We were fortunate to lose my husband, unfortunate to lose my husband, I should say, but fortunate that he had helped us set up a business that helped us be able to sustain beyond him. And I want that to be a message that young Black children understand, right? And in order for them to understand that, they need to understand what it looks like and what an entrepreneur looks like. So I think everything from historical Black colleges and education to what happens in the home, but more importantly, to showing them the ins and outs of what an entrepreneur looks like on a day-to-day basis, what decisions need to be made, what calculations need to be made, and what the true results of that look like for the community, for your family, and for the community at large. So we have to be present in this moment, and we have to show them what that looks like, and we have to show them what the results of that look like for the community at large. There's no other way than to show, in my opinion.
You bet. And Kamadi, I'm so impressed and intrigued with all of the programs that Visa has, and more specifically thinking about Rochelle and the young women and girls, your She's Next and I Fund Women, Black women, the grants programs in that regard. Thank you for all that you're doing at Visa and more to support existing businesses and also to help inspire this new generation. Any additional thoughts you'd like to add?
Well, I'm doing a lot the same as Rochelle, also instilling in my own family and with my own children. I do have a son who was going to attend college this fall, but had to, because of the pandemic and the distance learning, opted to take a year off. While during that year, he has set up his own small business, and that's been it's been very informative for him from an entrepreneurship perspective. I think that entrepreneurial mindset cannot be taught early enough. I didn't have that opportunity. I'm glad he has that opportunity, even though this overall situation isn't great. There is that opportunity to start something yourself. And so I agree that we need to do more of those things on a one-on-one basis, and keep that spirit going to the next generation.
You bet. So listen, let me say thank you, but I gotta ask this final kind of lightning rod kind of question, and this is the most difficult question that you will get today.
Oh boy.
And the question is, it's Friday. We all have been dealing with the stress, the challenges of the pandemic and the economy. Give me one thing that, as you think about Friday and the weekend, that you look forward to, that you look to have fun. Is it a movie? Is it a book? Rochelle, give us something inspirational.
Two things: basketball starts today, preseason,
There you
and football on Sunday. or where I'm at. In between, I'm cooking and spending some great time with my son. So that's plenty, and I look forward to it. I'm a sports person, so.
Nice. Kamasi, what do you say?
I'm just looking forward to spending a little time out and about my house, getting some fresh air and fixing this and that. We spend a lot of time on calls and inside, and so the opportunity and the freedom to get outside during the day and stretch, and even just doing some knickknacks around the house is going to be fun for me.
Well, I'm going to do a little of everything that both of you just said. So I look forward to it. We have to find those small things that do matter. I want to say thank you so much to both of you for joining us in this very important conversation on accessing capital. You are examples of the thought leadership, living out the dream of expanding equality of opportunity to all people. And we believe that an important part of that is inspiring, strengthening Black and minority-owned businesses in our country, so that they can be impactful and not just creating jobs, but leading and being examples for others to follow. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope that you have a great day and great weekend. See you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.